Good evening. I was just telling Jody and David earlier, there's nowhere else I'd rather be on my 23rd birthday.
Oh, happy birthday.
Thank you. Just excited to be back with you all. And just want to thank Jody for all the work she's done coordinating with Chair Webster here to make tonight possible and bring you all some information at your request and hopefully share a few things with you that you didn't know you needed. So we're excited to have you. I also want to welcome our guests, Mickey and Rhonda are here with us from Mickey, tell me your last name. Behind. Marinelli. So Mickey Marinelli and Rhonda Sims. Mickey joins us from the Office of Teaching and Learning, and Rhonda with our Office of Assessment and Accountability. So they will be helping address some of your agenda item requests later on in our call. Look, I'm not even here in person. A couple of reminders. Our sessions are always recorded, whether we're virtual or in person. Those are publicly posted later for viewing if you'd like to go back on KDE's media portal. Jody also takes our minutes for us and makes sure that those are posted for you so that you can go back as well and review any of our material. All right, so our agenda for this evening, in just a moment, Jody will go through our roll call. We'll go through welcome and introductions, just as we have guests in the room, a quick go around, make sure everyone knows each other. We do need to hold a vice chair election this evening as well. So Jody, I believe, reached out and asked for those nominations. We'll make sure no other nominations are in the room, and we will proceed with those we've received. Our Regional Innovation Specialist update. We also have Robert Meacham here from our team to share an update there. Legislative update, which I don't believe we have this evening. Science and curriculum updates. At the request with our guest here with Mickey, thinking about also the assessment questions that you all had around science, leaning on Rhonda there for us as well. And then I will also provide a Kentucky United We Learn update and talk about where we are in reimagining our accountability system. And we will turn things over to N with Chair Webster and just take open discussion and questions that you have. Any other agenda?
Any other agenda items that we need to add? I'd like to add one because I don't know if this is the right place for it. I've been noticing a lot of things, and there's a lot of people, especially new board members, what this affects is they're getting all their training online. And for a new board member, I totally think that is wrong. I think something should be set up with KDE that any new board member, say his first 4 years, 80% of his training needs to come from conferences where there's interaction. And then the next, if he gets in the next 4 years, 50% of it. Because anybody can, like NTI, anybody can go through an online course and let it run and say they completed it. And my board's guilty of it too. I mean, there's 2 or 3 of them, all they get do is online, but they need to get to the classroom. And I don't know if KDE can mandate something like that or what have you, but that needs to be brought up to the attention of the chair, of the commissioner, or what have you, to assure that board members, especially new ones, are getting the training they need because they have no idea what it's all about.
This was sent in to be put on the with KSBA controller or KDE controller. KSBA provides the training,
Right.
But the rule of part of the law, 12 hours, 8 hours, 4 hours. But when before there was only a limited number of hours that these people without going into actual in-person classes. When COVID hit, it changed. It never went back. And as Larry says, there's board members that never attend because they get 12 hours online and they're not around any other board members. There needs to be some communication with other board members. And I think that's all it's asking for. First way the KDE can step in and say, you can not have more than 6 online hours a year or whatever.
But there ain't some type of standard set on that. I know that the KSBA turns the ones that don't get the hours in told wires to the Attorney General, but he doesn't do anything. The bottom line is, it needs to be enforced. That part needs to be enforced. And the second part is, we need to set some requirements to the board members on how they get their training minutes.
Commissioner Fletcher, planning to be here, since his regrets, he cannot be here this evening, but certainly has asked me to bring back any feedback from you all. That agenda item and getting clarification and thinking forward. We'll make sure that that makes it to the right people at the agency and communicate with you, Chair Webster, to make sure the information gets back to this group on what a next step forward would be.
Thank you.
We'll prioritize that.
I don't know if this is an agenda item, but I have just been so thrilled at the support of Republicans for public schools, so that has voted down so resoundingly. And so I was worried, and it just really buoyed that how much people do recognize and appreciate public schools.
Worth a celebration.
Well, ACT, we talked about it in the curriculum phase.
ACT,
Yeah.
we can certainly answer
I sent a
questions.
question about that.
Yeah. We can talk about that.
I have one thing that's not necessarily an agenda item, but I think needs to be looked at through KDE. So our director of our vocational, our CTE and ATC. So a problem we're running into is with our co-op programs, specifically like factories. As far as insurance, we run it up, we get a factory saying, yeah, we can job shadow or whatever. It works it all the way up to their HR. And even though we've got, was it Advent insurance or something, I can't remember what he said, but there's the insurance that covers our kids. But even when it gets to that factory's like, no, they're not 18, or we can't pay them, or we need something from the state level, either working with Chamber of Commerce, something, because we've got all these kids in welding and industrial maintenance and stuff, and we need to get in factories. We built one in Berea. We built two in Madison County. We built one in Berea specifically for training factory workers, welding, industrial maintenance, and so forth. And we've got all these factories around us, but some of them are like, you're not of age, we can't cover. So we need some help with this. And I don't know if it's somebody from KDE reaching out, working with Chamber of Commerce, how we go about it, and I know we're probably not the only ones having this issue, so I'm sure it's a statewide thing, because we've got kids ready to get out, learn, and get to work, and that's what we've been working for a few years, and we've hit a roadblock.
The number's only growing, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
certainly when we talk about the United We Learn update, that becomes more and more prominent as students explore those personalized paths.
I think something that we need to do, and I think we talked a little bit about this in the summer. I think if they, the state or the state board of education, or whatever, the Hispanics that come into your schools that haven't been there that long, and they haven't mastered the language, and then they're required to take the test within, I think, a year in it or 2 years, whatever, but they haven't mastered the language yet. I think that's a problem, and I think that's something that would not cost anything. It would be a cheap fix. We don't like to think money all the time, but I think if they had it for those students until they mastered the language and got out of the English for a second language classes, I think that would help test scores.
Is that a federal guideline that we follow? It says 2 years.
I don't know whether it's federal or not.
It's federal.
Is it
It's a federal rule. Many years ago, the states were able to set their own rules for how many years English learner was in an English speaking school before they became in their accountability. At that time, Kentucky had a 3-year. But at some point when EL became more dominant in federal language, it was shifted to be, you have sort of one time that you can be exempted from the test. So, if a student comes in like in March, then they're exempted from the test in May. But then by the time you get to the next May, they have to fully take it and fully be accountable. And there's a few options in federal law that can expand it by about a year, but it requires that you have individual student growth in your accountability systems, which we don't currently have, but that's being proposed to potentially go back in the system. So there might be an issue, but we push on that issue when we're in federal meetings as well, because most people who talk about language development, the younger the child is, the quicker they master English, just like all of us, if we're learning a foreign language. The younger you are, the quicker that language development, the older you are, the longer it takes. And so this is particularly difficult for students who enter public English speaking schools like at 15 or 16. They also may have interrupted education. They may have been in war-torn areas. And so, but there's really very little federal flexibility around it. And so we've kind of pushed on it. We've argued about it. Other states bring it up. But I would agree with the premise. And, we're willing anytime we could get that flexibility to do it. We do have some legislators very interested in that. And so they're also talking about potentially at least putting forward a recommendation to our Kentucky delegation federally to see if maybe anything can get moved. But right now it's in federal law that way, so we'll require federal law change.
Well, Shelby County has 25% Hispanic.
Yeah, you're one of the big. There's about 6 districts that
Out
are.
of 7,000 students, we have 25% Hispanic. And they're really smart students.
Oh,
It's just the
absolutely.
language. It's
Hardworking.
just the language.
Yeah, and there's a difference between conversational language and academic language. So it's learning that academic language and that takes some time for students to do.
Barring not being able to do that immediately, I know we talked about trying to reduce the percent that proficient counts in the accountability system. And is there any discussion of that? Because
Like your proficiency could count less than it counts now.
we're having such large numbers of kids.
Right.
So it really impacts your overall functions.
I really think, I hate to say it this way, but that again requires a federal legal change, because right now the dominant amount of your accountabilities have to be reading and mathematics. They have to be over 50%. So that's where the proficiency comes in, is the reading and math performance. Again, there's discussion of going back to where in the new system, and Sarah's going to talk a bit more about this, but in a potentially new system to have student growth, so that the proficient would be maybe half the value, and then how kids are growing could be the other half, and that would probably help.
Ron, it seems like assessment accountability is definitely of interest to our group here. So
Absolutely. I know some of these people for a long time.
Let's about some of these topics if you want to. Let's go and move into the regular meeting and then.
Yeah,
absolutely.
and February is a quick turnaround for us as a group
Yeah.
too. So any speakers that we need to
Sure,
bring
sure.
in,
Yeah.
we will definitely work on that. So Jody, I'm going to turn it over to you for roll call.
All right. Felix Okoji,
Yes.
Larry Johnson,
Here.
Linda Duncan, Julia Fisher, here, Joanna Friel,
Here,
Michelle Hamilton, Joanna Hinton, here, Benita Murphy,
here,
Brenda Rose,
Here.
Brandon Rutherford,
Here.
David Webster,
Here.
Carl Wickland,
I have not seen him join.
okay, and Diane Berry is not here.
If we could just go around, as I mentioned for a moment, I've been with you twice now in this capacity. Sarah Snipes, our newer director of the Division of Innovation, taking David's place at the department. So again, just honored to be serving in this capacity. I'll just ask that we go around the table, just briefly mention your name and the community that you serve. That'll certainly help the guests in the room get to know you a little bit better.
I'm Julie Fisher from Bellevue Independent, and we are in northern Kentucky. We call ourselves one of the river schools.
David Webster from Simpson County. We're in southern state, Tennessee line.
Brandon Rutherford, Madison County. Everybody went to EKU, so everybody knows where I'm at.
I'm Joanna Frielson. I'm from Shelby County, which is just about 30 miles down the road. I had Brenda Rose, Whitley County. Whitley County's right off 75 right before you get to Jellicoe, Tennessee.
Okay, Nikki Rainieri from Office Teaching and Learning Chief Academic Officer.
Rhonda Sims, Associate Commissioner, Office of Assessment and Accountability.
Philip Lacodia from Paducah Independent, well, most western part.
Larry Dodson, Oldham County, and I want to tell you, this is my last meeting, and I've enjoyed working with everyone.
Benita Murphy, Webster County, and I'm down in the western part.
I'm Joanna Hinton from LaRue County, and we're right in the.
Robert Beecham, I'm the program manager in the Division of Innovation. I work for Sarah, and I'm from Anderson County, so I'm also.
We're a neighbor.
And I'm Linda Duncan, and welcome to Jefferson County.
I'm Jody Delman. I work for Sarah and for Roberts.
Thank you all for taking a moment there. I know last time we asked that you celebrate something in your community, and I'm sure that list has only tripled recently, especially speaking to the celebrations of the support for our public schools. So thank you all for being here tonight. We are going to, as Larry mentioned, thank him for his time and service as vice chair in this council. And so that does open up for us an opportunity to transition that vice chair role. I'm really hoping to partner with this person more closely, as well as David Webster, as we work towards building agendas and meetings that are meaningful for you, especially if we're coming from far out west on an evening. You want to spend your time in a valuable way. So we will take a moment just to recognize we've received 2 nominations via email to Jody at her initial request. So Brandon Rutherford in Madison County and Joanna Friels in Shelby County, both accepted nominations. So thank you all for accepting. Would ask, would anybody have an additional nomination that they wish to bring to the table at this time? I'll just ask for a second on the nomination for Brandon Rutherford.
Second.
And a second for Joanna Fritz. So because we do have more than one nomination, we will need to do this nominee by nominee, and Jody will make note of those who are in favor of each nominee, and then we will proceed with majority and approval first and second on that vote. So we'll begin. Brandon Rutherford, all in favor of Brandon serving as the new vice chair. Jody, it's probably easier if we go down the list, I believe.
Felix Okoji,
Yes.
Larry Dodson,
No,
Linda Duncan, Julie Fisher,
Yes.
Joanna Friels.
No, I was waiting for that.
Joanna Hinton.
Yes. Spread around.
Benita Murphy.
Yes.
Brenda Rose.
No.
Brandon
Yes.
Rutherford.
One for the
David
whole team.
Webster.
Yes.
I'm sure you can't lose either way. So, all right, we'll transition Joanna Friels in favor of serving as vice chair.
Larry,
yes,
Linda Duncan. Joanna Friels.
Yes.
Brenda Rose.
Yes.
Rutherford.
He told me if I ever did anything else, he was probably gonna divorce me. I'm involved in so many
My
things.
wife is not gonna be happy.
No.
Because she said the
This
same
isn't too
thing.
bad though.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah, what she said, I think she did too much.
It was an honor to be nominated too, so.
Like I said, you can't lose. Great nominees here.
David's still leading the ship.
That's it.
right.
That's it.
That's right.
Someone else to blame,
And
right?
I really don't know.
Oh, well, thank you all. Thank you for accepting the nominations as well. I'm going to pass things over to Robert Meacham on our team to talk to you a little bit about some exciting new additions to our team, our regional innovation specialists, and how they can be of service to you all.
All right, so our regional innovation specialists have been essentially continuing the work. There's 4 regional innovation specialists at KDE within the division now, continuing the work of the Deeper Learning Grant that ended, and so now with the United We Learn, they have funded 4 regional innovation specialists. We'll see a map here towards the end, I think. It does not like me. Maybe I'll just go. All right, so here's what our role is for as far as just to kind of, I know there's a lot of words on there, so I'm going to try and reduce it down to you. So the goal of our team is to just really assess where the districts are at right now as far as their readiness to implement the work of United We Learn. So those pillars of United We Learn, focused on Portrait of a Learner, focused on vibrant learning experiences, and then also talking about community engagement and innovative assessments. Right now, as the part of the first 2 years of an MOA, these 4 individuals are really looking at trying to, first of all, make contact with every district. That you might be surprised. That is actually the hardest part of our job, because once we get good contact face to face, we get a lot of good information. And once they find out also that we are, like Sarah has probably coined, that we are free 99 as far as what we charge, so we are willing to work for nothing to come and help them in the work once they realize that, and also that we have no compliance or monitoring attached to our work. They are very happy to see us and have us help them. So what we see is right here, Portrait of a Learner. Surely you all have either heard of that. Potentially there are right now 171 districts, obviously, but there are 95 that have finalized portraits that came out of the deeper learning work, especially with co-ops and KDE work. There are 29 that are kind of in that development phase. And then there are 16 who are kind of like they're dabbling, they're dipping their toes in there. They're checking to see if it's something. And then the others, as there are late adopters. Usually they want to see something mandated first, or maybe they're really focused. Really, what it is they're so focused on other initiatives, especially around reading and math, that they're like, let's let our teachers really focus on these things right now. So they are not in any of those phases. So. Right now, we have a kind of a sustainable effort. We are committed to making this 2 years a really valuable time of creating linkages and creating the face-to-face communication with districts across the field to really figure out where the work has already been done and to really uplift the work that's already been done to continue sustaining that work going forward. There is quite a regional variance, implementation of Portrait of a Leader work. Within, there are now 140 districts altogether that have taken part in this, and they're either starting, spreading, or sustaining that work. And so, what we've really found is regionally there is what we find is there's a really heavy push, especially in co-ops that had that used a lot of the deeper learning grant funds to really work this, where they're 2 or 3 years ahead maybe than other areas regionally. And we can talk about those regions a little further on, because I'm sure you might be interested, especially supporting districts in your region. You might like, well, where's my district look? What does my district look like, and where are we at? And I'm more than happy to help define those. Okay, so here's our statewide trend. So part of these trends, and like I said, these trends were gathered through one-to-one conversations, surveys, but it's our regional innovation specialists who are getting out there and actually asking these districts where they're at. 140 districts are engaged. But many of the districts who are not engaged, they see it as like it's just the next initiative. So we see that a lot. We see teachers, we see assistant superintendents who are like, it's not mandated yet. Like we're over initiative. And so what we've found is, and I don't know, maybe you all have heard that potentially in your district. Like there's so many initiatives. What does our focus need to be on? So we're definitely hearing that. The next thing, vibrant learning experiences. So vibrant learning experiences that is a pillar of our United We Learn. There are pockets going on, even in some of your districts. Obviously, there are districts represented here and communities represented here that have a lot of good vibrant learning experiences going on. Sitting across from Shelby County. Shelby County Schools has a very extensive work that they're doing around vibrant learning experiences, really making learning matter to the students, and as many of your districts do. But what we're finding is there's a little bit of a misunderstanding about what that really means. Like, do they have to change everything about what they're doing? Do they have to go all about projects? And what we're seeing is there are several districts that have really understood what vibrant learning really means, and it's really what we talk about is it's learning that matters, and there's a lot of different ways that we can go about that. And those that are worried about really going all in on vibrant learning, where they see that there's a problem is we really need to focus on mastery and proficiency, like you all have been mentioning right now. It's like, well, I've got 25% of my district that is struggling to read, and then we want to also do these vibrant learning experiences. Well, in the Division of Innovation, we're helping people understand that we can do both. We can do those simultaneously, and that's a heavy lift for us to help them understand that. There are high level examples in every region that have made a commitment to provide authentic learning experiences, performance assessments. You've got defenses of learning some places. Maybe you've heard of those. Maybe you've heard of celebrations of learning nights. We've seen those all over the place. That those are becoming very, very common, especially at different grade bands. And then the last two there, community partnerships. We're really excited about some of the growth of Portrait of a Learner. What we're finding is community partnerships are becoming. We're helping them see that that's the place we need to start with. Is really get with those local communities, those business members, and those Chamber of Commerce, and make that a very integral role of how you're building your portrait, how you're building your systems. And so where we're seeing the success of Portrait of a Learner, where we're seeing the success of these vibrant learning experiences is also it is a direct correlation to districts that have done the meaningful work on the front end to connect with their community, to ask their community, hey, what do you need from a graduate of our school system? And that's something that is we've seen that we're finding really great examples of that, and to continue to lean on. The local accountability, the L3s, the local labs of learning, those districts, we actually met with them today on a community of practice. It was awesome to hear some great examples of success coming out of Greenup County. They highlighted their local accountability model and their dashboard, and they were showing it to these other these other districts that are part of that L3 work. So those are those forerunners, 18 districts who are in, that have started this work for years ahead of time. And they are kind of there are sandbox. I like to think of them as, like, we get to go and play in the sandbox with these districts and try new things and be innovative with these people. And they are willing to try things, and their community is really supportive of them. And so these L3 districts in every region are well set up to then help the other districts. And that's where we're getting to in our steps forward with United We Learn.
It's going to come back and United We Learn. local accountability is probably a relatively new term in the way that we're using it. But I think all of you as board members probably recognize the practices behind it and the meaning behind it. If you imagine a district that goes to their community and says, what are we not measuring or being transparent about that is getting us and showing you that we are moving the needle closer to what you hope for our community strategy. So for Johnson County, for example, your community spoke up and said, we care a lot about graduating a high percentage of our students with relevant industry certifications. So that is not a traditional metric that our state assessment currently reports out on, or that we have a really good way to show transparently to Johnson County. So local accountability often shows up like a dashboard, something similar to what you're probably used to with school report cards, except imagine that it's locally determined metrics. What matters to us in Webster County? And how do our schools then work with our community to report that publicly and work together to grow in those areas? Probably the biggest success story I've heard of that so far is bringing in that Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah.
Suddenly we're reciprocally accountable to each other. You say you need this from me, but I need these resources from you to get there. And so that opens up a world of opportunities that we've heard in really solidifying some previously hard to reach partners. Because we all agree, this is what we want for kids. Suddenly it opens the doors to this is more of a holistic community conversation. So just want to put a note there for local accountability for those who have been less involved in the conversation.
I really agree with what you said, because the community partnership is a big, big deal, especially if you have several industries in your community. I'm on the education committee there in Shelby County with the chamber, and today we actually met, and the partnerships, you know, with the kids that are in our ATC building and everything, the community partnerships, they're finding jobs for them in these industries, and anything we ask the community to do, we have become not the community and not the school system. We've become one, and it's really helps. Everything we do revolves around the community now.
Yeah, what we're finding is not just business, but also community leaders. We have our Southeast South Central co-op. They our regional innovation specialist down there has been working with Perry and Letcher County, and they said, you know, we don't have a lot of industry here. I said, well, then what? You know, they said, well, what does your community look like? So, well, we have a lot of faith-based organizations. We have a lot of we have you know, these hospital and clinics. And I said, okay, well, now, like that's what we have to start to spread out to, and even start to look at the maybe the county next door, because you know that there is some transients between counties, especially when those students leave high school, about where they're going to go for their employment. And so they've done a really good job of actually working together, even though they are fierce rivals on the, you know, on every sports field or whatever. They are committed to working together as they're growing this thing, because they know that it's the best thing. It's been a really aha moment for some school members to actually hear from communities, to hear from you know, even the local community college, who is Whitley County is a perfect example of, you know what, you've got University of Cumberland's right there. Like when we have a community meeting, the University of Cumberland's or somebody from that's a major part of Williamsburg. I know my son goes there. So you know, they need to be a part of that conversation, you know, because then a whole lot of aha moments happen at the school level to say, oh, that's what our constituency wants from us. And it's kind of different for a school level administrator or teacher to really think about actually, you know, being, you know, serving the community as a service to then be filling those job vacancies. And that's a little bit of a shift for us. So here are some of our common challenges and successes. So first of all, talking about the challenges that we're seeing, and this is from the field, from the districts. They really feel like they've been overwhelmed by the number of initiatives, and having to prioritize those has been a struggle. And that obviously coming out of COVID, there's been a lot of changes with that. So there's been a lot of initiatives that have maybe changed because of now virtual option and different things. And so there is a little bit of an overwhelming. I come from a special education teaching background, and so I understand that students with gaps in their knowledge, COVID did us no favors there, and so there is a little bit of an overwhelming of, we're trying to catch our students up, and we're also doing this, and so another thing, struggles with systemic implementation, various factors, staff turnover. You all know about that. But staff turnover, buy-in, collective commitment to sustaining it, lack of resources. Obviously, when one grant goes away, how do we fund it? That's why we're really excited about KDE actually funding these positions, so that we can say, hey, we are now a free resource. You don't have to hope for grant funding to get this professional learning. We're here and we fill that void. And the third thing there, shifting mindsets from traditional instruction, assessment, and accountability models. That's a big one. So we're talking about simple shifts and having to be okay with having your students go through a performance assessment to be assessed for whether they've got it or not, rather than the ACT as a common assessment is what are their other options? I go back to Greenup County, and one of the cool things that I thought Greenup County was doing was thinking through their model about giving students a choice about which ones of these they're going to be, what is going to be that student's high stake test. I was like, oh, that's innovative, because then that student is going to have more buy-in to focus on what that high stakes test is that's going to matter for that student. Are we still going to make the juniors take the ACT? That's yes, but which one matters for that student? So shifting mindsets away from those things is a challenge. So some of our successes, I said it in multiple meetings in the last couple of days. Of 171 districts, you've got 140 districts with Portrait of a Learner. The 31 who don't have it, they know it. They know that they don't have it. So that's a good thing. So it's not that they don't know. It's not that we're trying to teach them. It's that advocating for, this is something that you really need to get ahead of. So that's a good thing. The word is out, and we are getting the word out even further out to let them know we are a free resource to help this get done. KDE has seen a need to sustain the deeper learning, and so we have our regional innovation specialist team now. And really exciting with our ILN, our Innovative Learning Network, approximately 267,000 students have been impacted through district leadership involvement in our ILN. So the folks who are involved in our ILN, we had 43 districts represented at our ILN event this fall, and of those districts, there were 267,000 students represented by those administrators, district level administrators, building level administrators, and those who are really in this work that are focused on United We Learn. So that's a really good success that we're excited about. That's a little fuzzier than, well, actually it's fuzzy on my page too. So it's fuzzy all the time. So here's how we've broken out our regions. Obviously we've got Callie Colley that's down in the west. She is out of Marshall County, is where she's primarily located. You see the stars there are attached to districts that are actively engaged, that she is actively engaged in working in. Down in the southeast, south central, Crystal Doolin, she's out of Bardville. I said that right. So she's a native of Knox County, and so she's down there in southeast, south central. Alexa Harden. There's no Alexas in here, like the little tab. Every time I talk to her on FaceTime, my Alexa goes off. I'm like, oh man, you really. She came out of the elementary school. Her kids thought that she was actually original Alexa. So she's doing great work. She's out of Fleming. County. Was an administrator in Rowan County. And then in that pink section, that's the Central Kentucky region. I'm covering that right now as we lost our previous regional innovation specialist to a job out of state, and so I'm covering those central districts. And so what you can see, there's a lot of stars. All right, so there's a lot of work that we are currently working in, and there's more being added every single day. I mean, I could add Covington Independent need. Oh, it's got, yeah, I did add a store on there. So I just started working with them this week. So we are working with districts that really, because of the work around the new accountability and assessment model, they start to see, hey, this is the direction we're going, and these are the folks that are going to help us really be set up for whatever comes. We're the folks who are gonna help that happen. So that just gives you an idea of where we're working, and we're probably from most of your, I think all of your districts that were talked about here have been worked with in the last probably 3 months. Guarantee you, I've either had a conversation if you're in the Central, or one of my specialists has had a conversation with your folks. But there's still a lot of work to do. Still a lot of work left to do, and the board is committed. Our KBE is committed to seeing us be successful. So we're really excited about where we're going. I think followed. Well, before that, are there any questions about our kind of our work or any of the information that I've shared? Got a minute or so. No? Must have done a good job.
No, I just have a question about our, where do we fall in this portrait of a learner? Because we don't call it portrait of a learner.
So yeah, portrait of a learner is kind of an umbrella. Some people call it portrait of a graduate. Some people call it, well, you've got your journey to success in JCPS. Yeah, sure. So where Dr. Speaks and Dr. Brooks, I've worked with on a monthly basis. It was just on a call with them today. They're part of the L3 work. So we're really excited about them actually about those two ladies from JCPS actually sharing with us at our L3 community of practice next month, actually share the journey of success and how that is going. So they're actually sharing with other districts. And that's the cool thing that we're finding as an example through our L3 work. You have JCPS who is going to share their journey of success next month with our L3s, and the L3s are going to sit back and not throw rocks at it, but that's an acceptable place for them to ask questions, take notes, see if it's something that they can use in their own district. So that's really how we're building. That's how we're building this. It really becomes a collaborative effort between districts. This week, Clark County was really excited about how Woodford County does PR. Right, Woodford County is a fantastic location for learning about how to get a word out and how to prioritize initiatives. Right, Ryan Asher does a great job as the assistant super there. So Clark County was excited about Woodford. 2 regional innovation specialists linked those 2 schools. Alexa took Clark County and a couple of leaders down to Woodford County. They met. It was supposed to be a 2-hour meeting. They met for 3 hours, and Woodford left with something from Clark County. Clark County took something back from Woodford County, and that's how. I mean, that's Harry and Letcher were taken to Rowan County last month, and they had and Rowan County said, "Come look and see what we're doing with our exhibitions of learning and at this 4th grade level, and then at the high school level," and they welcomed them in, and so man, we're seeing some really cool collaborative things between districts, which is a sustainable model. Like that's what we're excited about and it gets away from our color coding of districts to say, well, you're a green district and you're a red district and you're a blue. It's just like, look, we're just kind of all districts trying to do the best for kids. So let's figure out how we can use the smart people in our place and share with the smart people in your place and make it work.
Dr. Fletcher, we're here. You'd probably say with the competition on the sports fields. Kentucky, I've been lucky to go all across the country and talk about this work, and no one collaborates across district lines the way Kentucky districts do.
Yeah, other states are shocked.
Yeah, and then they want to learn how we're making it happen.
I was like, well, you just have to move to Kentucky. That's what it is.
California is asking. Their Board of Education is saying, can we learn? Can we learn? So
they've got more students than we've got.
Yeah, they have a little bit of
4 million students, 5 million students.
Well, thank you so much, Robert. He's your go-to guy if you want questions about just further opportunities in your district or just ways to reach out. Truly there to lend a hand and meet your district where they are.
Yep.
Just to have a conversation and see if there's a way we can. Thank you. I'm going to hand things over now to probably the ladies of the hour that you're really wanting to pick their brains.
Where do you want us to be, right here, or what do you?
You want me to, I can drive from here if you want.
Hey, all right. Well, happy to be with you this evening. And, I said this to the state board today. We are hearing about an exciting new house for assessment and accountability. So you've just heard sort of some of the work going on with Sarah's group, and I know you've been involved with that. We are making those plans. We're getting ready for that. We're still living in a house, though, that we have to maintain and we have to kind of meet the rules around. So what we're going to talk about is the house we're currently in. And, there's a lot of excitement for a future house. And can we get to a better place where there is more of a spirit of collaboration, where there is more of a spirit of looking very kid-oriented kinds of information. So very excited about that. Our office is very supportive and involved in that process. But we understand that you wanted to talk a bit about science. That's been the most talked about area with the state testing results this year. Overall, the results that are issued as part of the Kentucky Summative Assessment, there were a number of areas where we had a maintenance of performance from the prior year and areas where we had increase. And then really when we look at where we need to kind of focus some attention, science is the content area as a whole where that really bubbled up, particularly high school science. And we'll talk about that in a little detail. The other thing, we've had a little bit of dip in elementary social studies, but it was fairly small, little dip. We still feel like we're seeing recovery from the disruption of COVID. Mm-hmm. I know we all want to kind of move beyond that, but what we see in national work and national studies is the same thing. What other states are doing. It's just going to take a while. Our whole culture has sort of shifted during that period of time. And so let's kind of jump in with our next slide, Robert, and we go ahead with one more. Let's talk a little bit about what is drawing the attention. So just kind of put that on the table. These are state values for science. And then I want to give you some background of where we are right now in science and kind of tell you the most immediate step we're taking. But I think we have future steps that need more research and tying into some of the new information. Now, I'll remind you, there are 3 content areas that are federally required: reading, math, and science. Now, the federal requirement, now Kentucky has things beyond it. We require writing, we require social studies, and Kentucky law requires that all of those pieces go into what we now have as a color rating. Robert mentioned the color. We've had other kinds of ratings. We've had labels. We've had stars. We've had multiple things over time because we've had quite a frequency of revision to the state accountability system over the years. And so the most recent, the one we're currently reporting, uses a color system. So as we look at science, it is required, it is reported in accountability. On a federal level, you wouldn't have to report it in accountability, but at state level, we do. We've got that law in place. So that's a future conversation. Should it be reported as part of the federal, or just should we test it and report it? That's what you're required to do. But for where we are right now, it was part of the system. Now, the current science standards that were tested this spring actually started back in 2018. So in 2018, at elementary and middle school level, we tested the same set of standards that we had tested again in 2024. In fact, all of the assessment items were created in that first round of the assessment. So all of the items were loaded up front and all the creation was done involving Kentucky teachers back in 2018. With high school, we had a 1-year delay on it. At high school in 2019, that's what those little 1s and 2s mean. In high school in 2019, we had our first assessing of the current, well, I really shouldn't say current. We've already moved on to changes in science standards, but the standards that were in place starting in 18. And you can see the values were around 32% at proficient distinguished. And just a reminder, you have novice, apprentice, proficient, distinguished. So we have 4 levels. And the upper two levels, proficient, distinguished, is what when we go to our state legislature, that's what they want to hear about. So this is a slide we've used with legislators. So you can see we're around 32, 26, 30% as we got started. Then you'll see 2 big years where nothing occurred. We did test in that 21 year, but very limited. We kind of said to people, test kids if you can get them tested, and we won't have accountability. So 2 years of 1 year of no testing, no accountability, 1 year of some testing and no accountability. So then we come back in 22. You can see that in elementary level, in that first column, we're right now in 24, ahead of where we even started back in 2018. So, not ginormous leaps forward, but still growth, moving ahead, better as a whole, as a state as a whole. Middle, you see that it's a little down. At high school, it's that decline pattern you see that's got everyone so sort of concerned. And I will say that when we started to see even the first decline, and we were starting the process of revising science standards, and Mickey can speak more to that in a moment, we began to work toward that. Now, I will tell you that in addition to the science standards and the assessments going back, the definition of what is novice, apprentice, proficient, distinguished, all were set back in 18 as well. So all of that is consistent from 18 to 24. So the question becomes, well, what's happening at high school? And again, we know there is good science instruction going on many, many places in Kentucky. We know there are other kinds of measures of science. But remember, we're required by federal law to measure our specific Kentucky content standards. So a lot of times in high school, we'll get people who'll say, well, I did really great on the AP. I did really great on the ACT. I'll just remind you, those aren't measuring the same things. We're all calling science. Everybody's calling science. But what you're measuring, the standards are different. ACT is a science reasoning test. It's a lot of reading about science and prompts. AP is a end of course. You have a very structured curriculum, and you have a test that matches up to that curriculum. So there are different kind of factors. Another complication, I think, for us for science is we test science once in a span. That's what's required federally. So we give it one time in elementary, one in middle, one in high school. When we're testing that, we're testing all the grades from the last test to the next test. So at high school, we are assessing at one time with a student the science standards in 8th grade, the science standards that would really be across 9, 10, and 11 because we get into 11th grade. So we also are looking at that span. You've got this span of lots of information with science, and you're testing it. Maybe there's something that's sort of 8th grade oriented, but you're not testing it till 11. The same is true for middle. We test that in 7th grade. But you also haven't had a test since 4th. So we've got the 5th grade, the 6th grade, and the standards are set up, kind of grade band as well. So that's probably another factor we need to look into. And we go to the next slide. I kind of want to give you just a little background on the assessments in more general ways. Now, all of this is somewhere in law. Our office is kind of like if it's in the law, we implement. And so in Kentucky state law, it requires us to have what's called a criterion referenced assessment. That means we're measuring a standard and not how kids compare to each other. That's more a norm reference. But criterion reference, we're measuring the standards, which in this case is Kentucky's academic standards. We do have Kentucky teachers very involved in the process for the Kentucky developed assessments. Now, we use a vendor, a company that facilitates that, brings people together, put the items together, put it out there for testing. But teachers are involved in the core of this work. So back in 18, when these items were created, and 19, we had teachers helping to develop them, basically did much of the development with science. We had the teachers involved in setting the standards to look at what novice, apprentice, proficient is, aligning, you have to have a blueprint. That's the emphasis of a content area that you cover. It has to be turned in federal. So, for example, an easier example probably for most of us is social studies. We all know social studies has things like history and it has economics. So what percent of the test is history? What percent is economics? That's the kind of thing that's in a blueprint. So as we go to the next slide, we did have the academic standards that we reported on this year have already changed. State law requires our standards to be looked at every 6 years on a rotating basis. So we just completed in 2022 the newest version of the science standards that are in place now with teachers. They were actually in place beginning the 23-24 school year. They don't have a lot of shift, but we began the minute those standards got revised to say we need to develop some items to refresh the assessment. Because we were hearing from teachers things they were troubled by when the kids took the test. For one thing, the assessment is set up to be around science phenomena. That's in the standards. That means, a science concept. And then you have stimuli, things for the kids to read or react to. And then there might be 8 questions tied to that. That's a common thing you do with reading. You read a passage, answer questions. So it's not unusual, but it's unusual for science. It's a different approach with science. And so we began to have Kentucky teachers develop a new round. So what we have done, because we are concerned that the reading load could be impacting a little bit, just that kids kind of get worn out because there's too much reading and they're trying to read through the science heavy content. We were concerned we need to get this test refreshed. So we have those new items are going to come into the test this spring. The Kentucky kids will see test. We'll look on the next slide what we mean by some of the new things. So come in this spring, we'll bring teachers together and we'll relook at standards and we'll have basically a new assessment. Now that's kind of the immediate thing we can do for the assessment piece. It is not probably all we need to look at. We need to look, we had a student today at the state board make a great comment about motivation at high school. They're maybe not as motivated for this test and they're having to read it. It's a tough test. It is a hard test. It's a valid test, but it's a hard test. And that kids are maybe kind of going, it's not as important to me. That could be playing into it. Just in general, how, how we know the test aligns to the standards, but then how's that aligned to curriculum? And so I think we've got some far-reaching work to look at with science and potentially doing something quite different in science. I think because we are looking at a new system down the road, that's something we need to have with discussion. Our goals as we kind of refresh the assessment was to give some items to make sure that all kids kind of had ways to enter the test so that they didn't seem too hard. Sometimes if things are too hard, kids get a little defeated when they start. So make sure you got entry points along the way. We wanted to make sure it's still aligned to our standards and the blueprint. We have to prove that federally. Could we reduce the reading load so there wasn't as much to read before I get to answering items, and provide some broader content coverage? So as we go to the next slide, we'll propose, this is scheduled to go into the test in 25. We'll keep these items in the front, these kinds of items. We'll have multiple choice items. Multiple select is where you have more than one correct answer, and there's you make choices of the correct answers. Technology enhanced, or where the computer can move things around for the students while they're testing. Constructive response means anything a child writes an answer to. And of course, they're typing it on the computer since we're computer-based. But we want to add new items. We want to add some standalone, just single items around science and some short answers. And the bigger change, I think, that will affect how the test looks is there'll still be items connected in a set, but there might be 4 items and less reading, shorter stimulus to look at. We think that'll make the test more approachable. And so that's kind of just an immediate thing we can do around assessment. But then Mickey and I, we do a lot of things together. We talk a lot about this interaction between assessment and standards. I think we also have to kind of research a bit more into just how this plays out. Because again, we know there's good science teaching going on and good instruction, and we see successes in other kinds of assessments as well. So we've got to kind of see what we're measuring in science, how we're measuring it, how it's relating to the standards. And so that's kind of our next steps for that. And I think when you go to the next slide, and we're going to talk a little bit about the resources. So let me pause and answer some questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So on your question types, are there any questions that are the best answer? Not necessarily no right or wrong, but the best answer.
I would have to go look.
Because I know we do. I know EMS does,
Right.
when we do it,
Right.
they do a lot of the
Best
best answer.
answer, yeah.
And those are really confusing
The can-
because you can look at them because there's no right, there's no
Right.
wrong.
Right.
It's just which one is the
Typically,
best.
especially with a multiple choice item, you want a clear line. answer.
Right, yeah,
You want-
that's why I was wondering, you know, are there is
I would say-
yes or no?
Yeah.
correct answer?
Yes, there should be. And I would say that anytime we might use something that was more best concept would be something like where a student makes a choice and then maybe defends a position. And that's in testing overall, not just science. Or you might have a kind of item where a student is asked to sort of solve a solution or offer a solution and then explain why. There might be more than one correct
Yeah.
way. that
Because
you
I know a
get
lot
to
of times when you
solution.
get into those type of
Right.
advanced answers, it can sometimes cause the test takers
That's
to
right.
have
It's
doubts
also-
in themselves.
And it's also like the one we've probably all seen commonly from when we took tests,
Mhm.
what is not, you know,
Yeah.
having people
Yes.
reverse their thinking
Yes.
to not, that's something we don't
Yeah.
put in the state.
Because, you know, we're sitting them in front of this computer for so long.
It is.
And
It
so
is
many
a
different
draw.
things that
Right.
we don't need to play
Right.
mind games to
That's
take the
right.
test.
That's
We
right.
just need is this the right answer or just the wrong answer.
Right, right. Absolutely. And so, you know, I think over time, you know, this is kind of an immediate refreshment. We were going to be refreshing this test anyway a year from now. We have worked with our vendor. Pearson is our primary test vendor, and you know, lots of testing.
That's who does area
And,
test.
and, you know, they do lots of testing of all kinds, you know, business area testing, and they are a good partner with us. And we said, we want to accelerate this and get this in place. And so, they, in our current house, we're accelerating this. We'll see how this works out. We will bring teachers together to reset what is novice, apprentice, proficient, distinguished. So I think that will give us a more normal experience with science, but I still think we've got to ask some of those questions about just how it connects to what students' experiences are. And because again, we independently confirm that we're measuring the standards. We actually have to do an independent alignment and turn that into the federal government. So we know we're measuring standards, but I think we have to look a little deeper at what the high school experience is with the students. And, you know, again, down the road, maybe a different kind of test would be more appropriate because I think there's some excitement around more of the performance assessment kinds of things that Robert mentioned. So, you know, maybe there's pieces of the test that would be more multiple choice and something done statewide because you do have to give a consistent statewide test federally and report it. But then maybe there's ways to do that richer work within performance or in other kinds of ways. So again, it's a kind of a work in progress and I think an important revision that we've accelerated by a year using those normal processes. And then I do know we're getting calls, and I know we got one mentioned today in the board because somebody responded on a Sunday, got a question on Sunday and responded. I think people are trying to get their hands, even though those standards have been in place a while, we've had that break of COVID. So just to give you an example, the kids who took high school science in 24, those students had not had a state science test since fourth grade. So during the middle school years, we weren't testing.
Big break.
So that's a big break with this sort of this state summited kind of science test. And, you know, that in itself could have some level of impact. But I do know we have people asking about help us have good resources with science and information. And I think the final thing I'll say before I turn it over to Mickey is that the science standards are challenging standards, and they're a little different than what we've had like when we were doing science probably. And even just in the iteration before 2018, they have disciplinary core ideas. So that's kind of the meat of science. But then you also have cross-cutting concepts that cross those disciplines of science. And you also have a third element that's called engineering, science and engineering practices. And so it's all three of those pieces that form the science. But some of those pieces are newer to teachers. And again, we had that kind of break that may have slowed some of that momentum down of people really getting those new science standards in place. And when you look at some of the other assessments that have been mentioned for science at high school, like comparing results, they don't all have that kind of structure of standards. And so lots of states have that, but you know, it's a more complex set of standards for teachers to work with as well.
And just as an example, so you know, in high school, most of our students are taking biology in isolation, chemistry in isolation, physics in isolation, and the standards require much more of an integrated approach. So a high school student will sit down to take that, and they're asked to apply or transfer that knowledge across multiple disciplines. When in most cases, now there are some districts that do have an integrated approach to science at the high school level. But most students are still taking those as isolated subjects and are not really, unless it is a science department where they are kind of acknowledging that and working very hard to ensure that there is that ability to apply and transfer across the disciplines. I think for many students that may not be happening as regularly as they would need to be set up to be wholly successful on an exam such as the science test currently.
You know, and overall with results, we do think there's still two big pieces that are probably influencing overall test results in the summative space. And that's chronic absenteeism. We're still having trouble getting kids to come back to school. That kind of got rolling with COVID, and it's still there. And those numbers are really up across the state. They've come down a little, but they're still much higher than we. And you know, the department has had a campaign. Hopefully, you've seen an ad. Or
Oh, yeah, but don't mention homelessness.
And
They tore us up on that.
Oh,
That's
homelessness.
Yeah.
And so you know, we've tried to have the department's had a campaign. I think it's called, you know, we missed you. We missed you school day. We missed you in art. We missed you in science. Just trying to help say, yeah, you really should come back and be in person and you know, experience school and education. The other piece is teacher shortage. You know, and that's can hit certain areas and in certain communities worse.
It hits everywhere.
It's everywhere. And I know, you know, you're my thank you go Colonels.
Yeah, even
but-
we have shortages. I mean,
Well, absolutely. And it really shocked me. I'll share with David Gillen. David and I were talking, outgoing superintendent there at Madison County. And, you know, EKU's a big developer of teachers. They have a big teacher ed program. I taught Model Lab years ago. So, you know, it's a big teacher ed program. He could not find a certified middle school science teacher.
Yeah.
And, you know, you're right there in the community where they are producing teachers, you know, right there at the university. Now, some may be moving and going home, but still had trouble finding that. I've heard, I can't remember the district that they've had a chemistry position at the high school open for years. You know, they're obviously filling it as best they can and have, you know, subs maybe connecting virtually and that kind of thing, but they still have an active position that they haven't been able to fill. And for science, there's a little added complication in high school because when you're certified as a teacher, you're certified for a specific area of science.
Yeah.
So you're certified for biology or chemistry, whereas math teachers, you're teaching the whole range of math. You're certified math or you're certified language arts. So all of these things kind of, I think, overlap a bit in what we've seen in this high school pattern. And so we're going to work on the test because we can get peace on that really quickly and move that forward really quickly. But I do think we got to have conversations around the certification piece, the motivation piece, this, how do you make it more meaningful? You know, how do you really kind of see those standards playing out in the experience of students?
I had some students. Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, I don't know, I think the motivation part really needs to be looked at because by high school, they're seeing this is not meaningful to them. I mean, we saw that on ACT. I think they had 36, like you said that last night in the meeting, 30 kids earning 36 on ACT in science.
Oh yeah, there's probably a few that
And 40% proficient on the state test. So it's not meaningful to them to take those state tests, and we've got to figure out how we make it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I know you mentioned ACT David earlier. Our ACT performance, I haven't been on those notes with me. This year, our composite as a state was 18.2. And, you know, that's out of over 36 and 90, and we had been 18.5 the previous year. So there's a slight dip in the composite. But I will mention to you, I don't know if I have the content in it. I think I do. In science, there was, I think this year we were 18.6 and last year we were 18.7. So just a slight did there in high school in science. I will tell you, ACT is making changes to the ACT, and the science assessment is not going to be part of the composite score moving forward in the future. That's a company decision with ACT, and they will still sell a science test to you, but it will be a separate science test. You know, you would still be in Kentucky right now has state law that says kids will take science on the ACT. It spells out the subjects, but the company is no longer. It probably is another year before it totally comes into place. But when you get your composite overall ACT, it's always had science in it, and it will not have science.
The program that run into with ACT is required all juniors to take it because, and that's why the scores go. Because if you're not going to a college, you don't have the skin. If you're going to CTE, you don't have the skin in it. I'm not going to try out with CTE, but if you go to college, you're going to get the P's money through the ACT. So it brings our deposits down, which takes our accountability down. And that's the question that I have. Why do we require all juniors to take it if they're not going to college? Now, the reason I'm asking is when I was in high school, last year I was in high school, was the last year that they required 4 years of English. After that, if you was not going to college, you didn't have to because of English. You wasn't required for the second English, which was a good thing, but they brought it back again. But again, why do we require all juniors to take it if they're not going to enter college?
Yeah, it's a state law. Right now. It's a state law right now. I can't tell you all the behind the thinking about it. It's been in place for a long time. And we continue to test really pretty much 100% of kids at the junior level. There's a group that are alternate assessment students that have more severe disability and they take something other than the ACT. But I think it was more at the time it came in state law, it was more about giving all kids an opportunity to take it. I don't think probably conversations around accountability was part of that, but it was more about an opportunity to take it because, you know, the ACT is fairly expensive to take. And so if you're not a kid that's really thinking about college or some other measure, then you might not have put the money forward to take that. So I think the state wanted an opportunity for every kid to get the opportunity to take it. And I think occasionally you'll get a kid who they don't think about college or another post-secondary. There's lots of great post-secondary things rather than college. They don't think about that. And then they take the ACT and they do pretty well on it. And then suddenly they're like, well, maybe that's something I can do. We've heard, you know, some stories like that, you know, just as people talk about their personal experience. But I would say, David, that the conversation when it came into state law was more about opportunities for kids to have it. And then maybe some data to look at as well, but opportunities for kids to have it. I doubt that really it was part of the conversation on accountability. And right now, the way the ACT is in accountability, it's one way a kid can be post-secondary ready, but it is publicly reported. So that's probably where, you know, you're paying attention to school board members, you're paying attention to your trend and the public reporting. And it's one of the few things since COVID, we have trends before COVID. ACT maintained their trends across the COVID period. And so that's looked at.
Can I ask something? One thing that I'm happy with United We Learn and assessments is I think there's a big, even talking to my daughter and other kids who are actually do very well in school and with students, and you know across the board. But motivation, and I think that is huge. And I like that we're thinking moving forward to some accountability. Because they think it doesn't matter. They don't care anything about it because it doesn't matter. We take it at the end of the year and it's just done. So, you know, I think giving them that accountability and responsibility for their learning, you know, of course, supported by the professionals, but I think that's a big piece too. It doesn't matter. What's it mean to me?
Absolutely. One of the comments that got brought up in the state board today, you know, with the board earlier today, was many years ago, we had an end of course test at high school based on like biology or algebra 2, but the score could be included in the student's grade. And so that was kind of a motivator. You know, kids were that was up to, it could be up to 10% of their class grade. APs are grade based as well as scholarship based. So those are kind of personal motivations for kids to be motivated. to be a little more attentive to it. But again, that's kind of where we are with the science, and we're hoping to see, again, to think about, can the future look even different? Because so this is kind of, I think, a phased-in approach. Let's see what we can do with refreshing the assessment, improving that experience, and then moving forward. Is there something that can be better? And I know Mickey's group is helping people out all the time, like our lady that got mentioned today about resources in science. And I know you'd be happy if people could pass along some of your information here that we'll share through the slide board.
So I'm just going to talk a little bit about what does this mean for teaching and learning and how we are trying to support educators. Because I don't think any of us are happy with the science outcome. So what does that mean in terms of action steps? So our main mission is increasing access to vibrant grade level learning experiences for students across our state. We want that. We want learning to be meaningful. We want it to be relevant. And we want students to be motivated to be able to demonstrate what they have learned in whatever academic content area we're talking about. So we're working very hard to make an investment in teachers, in building leaders, and district leaders to increase that access to high quality standards aligned grade level learning. And to do that, one of the ways is by ensuring that they have access to quality resources. So it is very difficult to design your own lessons around these science standards. They are complex. And again, as we discussed, they cross multiple disciplines. So we're trying to support local districts, and you may have had some conversations within your district about, well, what does that look like for science? And I'll be very honest, there are very few validated external resources for science that would help educators really teach in that capacity. One of the ones that we often mention, I think about Graves County specifically, they have, they're really a model at utilizing OpenSciEd. And those are free educational access resources that allow for some of those performance-based demonstrations. So there are resources and tools that can come to educators where they're not having to go out and try to create all of that on their own. So there has to be great support across the district to be able to ensure that not only are the content of that class aligned to grade level standards, but that it's actually something where the students can demonstrate their knowledge of science in innovative and creative ways. So that is a challenge. We also are providing professional learning. So we have science consultants at the KDE who are creating modules, professional learning modules for teachers. Some of them are asynchronous modules. They're doing a lot of synchronous workshops. They do that for teachers. They do that for coaches. And they are in the upcoming spring going to be conducting that for leaders as well. And then we also partner with outside organizations like PIMSR. If you've heard of PIMSR, they're one of our historical partners, and they have grant programming that allows districts to engage with other science teachers across the state, across the nation, and that has really helped with some of the calibration of what we're doing as well. And then that last one, in our board meeting today, one of the board members, her nephew is a seventh grade science teacher, and he was having some difficulty finding some resources for a particular unit of study. Didn't even know he could reach out to the Kentucky Department of Education for support. So we have, in some ways, a communication problem, and I bet Robert, Sarah, Jody, you all would say the same thing. So we are constantly trying to help the field understand that there are available resources for free and that we do provide some technical assistance and support on behalf of teachers for the good of students that they're serving. On the next slide, this is specifically some of the resources that have been developed for science. There are a lot of modules around sense making, phenomena-based instruction. Again, if students aren't able to experience a phenomena-based instructional experience in their classroom study, and then they go to take the test, and that's the way that it's developed, that shouldn't be the first time where they see that. So of course, that's going to be very challenging for the student. But again, developing phenomena-based instruction is very challenging. So how are we as leaders supporting those teachers and ensuring that students are able to be exposed to that? In terms of resources and materials, one thing I want to point out, there is a resource it's called Atlas, the Kentucky Atlas, and it is a web-based tool, and it's focused specifically on Kentucky-based phenomena. So that was supported by the American Institute for Research. They're one of our partners, and they utilized Kentucky teachers to develop some instructional tasks. And so I would guess that there are a lot of teachers that don't even know that that resource exists. So again, that goes back to some of our communications challenges. We also have published a consumer guide to help districts consider what high quality resources in science actually looks like. And so it would take them through the process of evaluating and vetting and selecting the best resource for the local district. In terms of pilot opportunities, we are in year 2 of a local science pilot. Rowan County, that has been mentioned as a part of that science pilot, and they have been a wonderful partner, but there are other districts as well who are going through that. And so they were able to walk alongside our professional learning coordinators and Office of Teaching and Learning to really evaluate the resources. They develop an instructional vision. So what does high quality science instruction look like across our district? So that's really the first step. Like do all of the district leaders, principals, teachers, can they speak to what high quality science instruction looks like? And if you haven't had that conversation, it's very subjective and people might have different views of what that looks like. So that's a really important piece that could be done at the local level and that we would be happy to support in thinking through what does this look like for high quality science instruction. And then once you know that, how can you look at instructional resources or the development of resources to ensure that those resources are aligned to our vision for what high quality instruction looks like? And then again, I've mentioned PIMSR. That second bullet under PIMSR, we're wanting to also elevate bright spots. So if you have districts, if you have schools who are really, if they've got it going on in science, we want to be able to tell their story. We want to be able to elevate that for the good of other districts across the Commonwealth. And again, that sort of cuts down some of that competition, but let's celebrate each other and celebrate the success that we're seeing. So that's part of some of our work. And we're using some of our partners and their engagement in other districts to know where we can lift up those stories. I think that's it. You got our contact information there, but happy to address any other questions that you may have for Rhonda or myself.
So is this something that we can do? So like we have math coaches, reading coaches in every building. And so, so we started out with our schools that were overperforming and we've expanded those to every building now. Every school has its math coach, reading coach. So is this something that we could do as a science coach also?
So
Is there enough information there to justify?
I think it's a capacity issue because we already have shortages in science and you would want to pull your most highly effective science teachers to be coaches. And that's wonderful if they have someone else that can go in and take that classroom role. But I believe in coaching. I think it is extremely powerful. So I wonder if there's a way we can uplift teacher leaders. And so keeping them in the classroom, but finding ways to utilize their skill and expertise to support not only the folks in their building, but maybe across the district or across their region. And that's part of the work. So Erica Baker and Amanda Pruitt are looking to have that leadership network that's happening to really elevate teacher leaders so that they will feel equipped and empowered to provide professional learning, whether that's in their school, in their district and beyond. So we're getting there, but it's a shortage and capacity issue, I think, across our state.
Thank you, Rhonda. Thank you so much.
It's always great to see people.
If something comes up for you as you work on this, I know in the time that we have, jot a note, get it to Chair Webster or Jody, myself, and we will make sure that we get answers from these experts here.
I will send out the entire slide deck so you'll have all the information that we talked about today.
In the interest of time, I'm going to be brief, but I want to point you towards something that will go much deeper. And the same sentiment is there. If you have a question, if you go to a resource, specifically, I'm going to point you to yesterday's Kentucky Board of Education meeting at the 27-minute mark. I shared that earlier. At the 27-minute mark, you will see Dr. Jennifer Stafford on Rhonda's team speak to a framework 1.0 of the reimagined accountability system. She is phenomenal. I think she could do this in her sleep at this point, Rhonda.
I think so. She's awesome.
As a kind of a key author in what that framework looks like. I say author in that, truly it's been a work of listening and interpreting, working alongside, and then putting that on paper, which to get an entire accountability system kind of framework and thought laid out into one pager even is a tremendous task. So the board meeting yesterday, again, at the 27-minute mark, you can access that on the KDE media portal. We'll make sure we follow up with a link to that meeting. You can hear her talk about the components that are being discussed. That is going back out. A 2.0 is already in the works. I think as we speak, someone's probably working on that at home. But it reflects immediate feedback that we've received, some of that pertaining to science, for example. So I encourage you to listen to that conversation. You're going to be very well informed about what's being discussed in this next new house, perhaps, that we're looking at. Do want to lift up just to highlight a couple of the things that you will see there. We've talked about already tonight. There's been an emphasis and a desire to increase local flexibility. Thinking about those local systems, how do we enable districts to take on that work that is so meaningful to them and lift that up in a space that is recognized in accountability? Really thinking about balancing that local autonomy with our necessary statewide data and maintaining those federal requirements, but in ways of streamlining that. Kentucky, we know, goes above and beyond federal requirements in many ways. And so we've been listening very keenly to hear from districts and others on their thoughts. Also thinking about a shift in our current system, really that trust and empowerment. So thinking about an inclusive process, as we talked about, there are some assurances there. We would want to see that a district is deeply engaged and committed to bringing that chamber in, bringing those students in, having the tough conversations about what do we want for Nelson County kids, right? And so to think about and have those conversations around building local assessment and accountability systems. Josh Matthews, who is now with Shelby County, formerly in Logan, he made a great point at a board meeting recently. He said, this is not easier. It is not easier, but it's way more impactful to their community as they had seen. So just kind of taking that level of trust into their design. And then lastly, we've mentioned it now in a few ways, building a system where we connect districts to one another. Cohorts, perhaps you might have heard Commissioner Fletcher say, how do we take like districts, geographically, student demographics, resources, how do we start to put them together to be critical friends, strengthen each other's systems for their students, and then every third year, perhaps, have an external evaluator come in and really review that system. So you've got this kind of feedback cycle with your peers across the state to build up those local systems and then review those. That is a very abbreviated, very, very abbreviated version. The discussion with Dr. Stafford goes much more into detail about what the assessments could look like, as well as accountability. So again, I apologize for tacking that on to you as homework perhaps, but I think it's well worth your time. I will note that in January, we hope to see you at your local co-op. We are going to do a, what are we talking? Town hall. Dr. Young has me thinking roadshow now, and I never thought that before. I never thought that until yesterday. Now I can't get off of it. So town halls will be hosted at each and every co-op. Dr. Fletcher and Dr. Stafford are actually going to be the ones leading much of that conversation. They will bring 2.0 to the table at that point, and that is a big moment of feedback. We hope you share that broadly with your community. We hope to reach not only educators, but your communities. So we will make sure you get that information as well. We'd love to see you. And perhaps more importantly, we'd love to see your constituents there as well. And so we will make sure you get that information. Jody will be sure to follow up in an email and work with Chair Webster on that as well. Open discussion for 60 seconds. I'm not quite sure. We're really good at this problem. We're really good at this problem. But that's good. That's good.
We get that.
I would ask, Chair Webster here has mentioned the February annual conference here, same place, same time, on a Friday, however, from 6 to 7:30. I will just add, I mean, is there interest here in this group to extending to 8 p.m.? It's a long day, so I try not to push, but I also want to deliver on the content that you want. We had discussed that and just weren't quite sure how people felt moving it to an 8 p.m.
So we're gonna do it on a Friday instead of Thursday?
Is it this?
That
Is
would should be on
Me,
Thursday.
the conference starts on 21st through the 23rd.
okay.
So it's actually.
So it
should be
is
Thursday.
Thursday.
It should be the 20th.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I apologize. We will correct that on here so that you get the right date.
Conference is the
Yeah, because we
21st.
have something going on there.
So you'll get that corrected in your email as well. Are there any agenda items that Jody certainly made note of the things that you brought to our attention at the beginning? We will follow up and get you the folks at the agency or beyond who can help guide us in those discussions. Anything else that you would like to explore in February?
I think the most important thing, next meeting would be legislative. That's the most,
Yes.
that's the biggest question in the.
90 minutes
Yes.
specifically.
You'll probably
Makes
need
our
90
job
minutes.
easy.
You'll probably need 90 minutes.
And we will have an update then as well. Our board will meet about that accountability model. So just keep your ear close to that conversation. But leading up to February will be a very big time for us. So I hear legislative updates, big priority. Anything else that comes to mind?
Accountability.
Accountability. Okay. I'll leave 30 minutes, I guess, too. Well, thank you all. Chair Webster,
Yeah, it's just, I'm glad all of you come. I hated to see Larry and Diana leave, you know, I served on the kids, schools, with the board of directors with them, and we had a lot of good conversations. I enjoy all of you all being here. I think it's participation in this, for sure. It's an important thing. I know a lot of people don't think a lot about school boards, where we just have to bring out here, but we do a lot of work that's behind the doors, no matter what. I'm thanking you for all of that. Looking forward to seeing you.
Thank you.
and congratulations to our new vice chair.